go. Podcast starting. There it is, the abrupt intro ending. Welcome. It's the John Cast Podcast. It's a special edition of the John Cast Podcast. Why, you ask? Well, because there was huge news in the NBA that I think we need to talk about. And this podcast is brought to you by Ian's Pizza. Check out Ian's Pizza with their locations in Madison and Milwaukee. Now, today's guest is part of the Milwaukee Bucks Radio Network. You can hear him as an in-game analyst with Dave Kane. You can also hear him on the pre and post game shows. He's got a podcast called Bucks Talk as well. And he joins Kelly Sheffield, Dennis Punzel, Mike Lucas, and Brian Posick as the only repeat guest on the John Cast Podcast. Welcome, Justin Garcia. How's it going?
Those are, and just watching that intro too, you're like, why am I here? Look at all these names that you've gotten. Also, I was just thinking about this the other day. I think you and I first met in 2002 when we were in lacrosse. But we're probably close to to the day, the 20-year anniversary of you and I doing a show together.
Oh, wow. Is it 20 years?
It was 2003 that you guys finally let me on the air on the local show. And it had to have been in September. So we're somewhere around it.
Man, I've got a box full of tapes from the local show, cassette tapes.
I think I have two of them left. Yeah.
Oh, if you need some, I've got some.
Absolutely. I got to hear how brutal I was.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I listened to a couple minutes once, a couple of years ago. I was like, wow, this is crazy. They let a bunch of 20-year-olds just take over a radio station.
I was going to say, not only be on, we ran that thing.
Yeah, the whole thing, all of it. That's crazy. Well, obviously the big news in the world of the NBA and the Milwaukee Bucks, the team that you cover, happened yesterday. I was at a hotel room in Columbus, Ohio, waking up from a nap, and I look at the phone. I'm like, wait, what? What's going on? And I have to Google it. I'm like, wait, is this happening? Is Dame Lillard now a Milwaukee Buck? And yes, it's true. Dame Lillard is now a Milwaukee Buck in a huge trade. I always see these rumors. You see them on Twitter where it's like, could the Bucks get this guy, or is Golden State going to add so-and-so, or is so-and-so headed to the Lakers? And I'm always like, oh my God, this is just crap that people put out on the internet, half of it just to get clicks and get impressions. And so when I saw the Dame Lillard thing, I was like, okay, maybe, I don't know, but that'd be amazing if it happened. And it actually happened. And I was shocked. And I'm super excited for the Milwaukee Bucks over the next few years. What was your reaction when you heard about Dame coming to Milwaukee?
I wasn't shocked. I'd heard about it for a couple of days. And no, I'm kidding. I was absolutely
I was like, oh, okay.
No, I had the same stuff where we did it on Lockdown Bucks podcast a month ago, where more of those, well, the Bucks are kicking the tires on Dame, so I guess let's talk about this. And my whole stance then, and I wasn't the only one with this, was it makes sense, and I would love to have Dame, but there's no way this happens. The Bucks don't have the assets for it. So when I first learned of it by on my phone, I got a notification, and it wasn't on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. It was Mark Stein. I subscribed to his Substack, and in his discourse, there was a notification that popped up of in what world do the Bucks have the assets for Dame? And I was just looking at it well, that's kind of strange. Why are we even having this conversation? And 10 minutes later, my phone just starts blowing up and I see these tweets wait a minute, this actually happened? And looking at the package, my initial reaction was there's no way this is the best package that the Blazers could have gotten. That it feels like this is a spite move, that this is just, we're not dealing with Miami. I've heard some people pitch well, it's just small market teams looking out for small market teams. I don't think it's that, because Joe Cronin has to protect his job yet. But I just thought there's no way this is the best Miami could have gotten. A day removed from it, the more that you've examined it, I actually think it's a really good offer and a good package that the Blazers get, because I still own some DeAndre Ayton stock. I know it hasn't been performing well the last 2 years, but there is something there, and he's better than Jusuf Nurkic, and you got rid of Nurkic's deal. You own the Bucks draft capital for 3 years. At the end of the decade, you have their pick in 29. You have those 2 pick swaps in 28 and 30. And there's a very, very good chance the Bucks are going to be a lottery team for that portion of the decade where the Blazers have those picks. And then you get Drew Holiday. And I know we said, well, Dame is better than Drew. And that was kind of one of the things that you would kick around. And also, well, why would the Blazers want Drew Holiday if they've moved into rebuild? But now they can spin him. And you've already seen in the last, 12 hours, how much that's changed of teams that are back in now because we didn't think we had the assets to get Dame. We think we do to get Drew Holiday. And that puts the Blazers in a position to just be like, the asking price for Drew Holiday, it's the same. It starts at what it was for Drew Holiday or for Damian Lillard. So line up your offers. So they're going to get assets from that too, that when you examine all of it, it's actually a pretty good deal where the Bucks, on paper, it doesn't seem like they gave up a lot, but they did mortgage their future. They had to do it, but the Blazers are betting on the Bucks being bad at the end of the decade. And I got to be honest, if I'm looking at the two teams of Miami and Milwaukee, Tyler Hero's a fine player. He's not going to carry you the value that Drew Holiday would if you're going to flip him in a trade. And also, I'm going to bet on Bucks draft picks versus Miami because since Pat Riley arrived in 92, 93, 94, I think, 30 years basically that Pat Riley's been in Miami, they've missed the playoffs 6 times. And they've been a bottom 10 team 3 of those 6 times. It's a pretty stable organization. It's in Miami where players want to play. They're not going to have a hard time getting people. And I think you've seen that with that track record of success. And if you're betting against one, the chances are probably better that the Bucks are going to really bottom out before the Heat would.
And so now Lillard joins Giannis after all the dust settles. And this is a guy that, what he scores 71 in a game. The point is he's elite, right? And his outside shooting is elite. And I guess my question is, in your opinion, what did the Bucks look like next year with Giannis and Dame on the court with Khris Middleton? Hey, don't forget about Middleton. I mean, what are they going to look like?
Brooke, too.
Yeah, don't forget about. Yeah, that's a good point. How do they look to you next season?
Well, it certainly seems like if the Bucks don't have the best offense in the league by way of offensive rating, they're going to be in the top 3, probably. The way that this has shaped up, that Drew was a fine player, and Drew was obviously elite defensively. He can fit in almost any scenario where he's the tertiary scorer, and he's the guy that can give you 15 to 20 points a night if you need more. We saw that stretch last year where he was the player of the week, and he gave you that. But Damian Lillard is the perfect fit to play alongside Giannis. And, I'd say the Bucks have never had a player like Damian Lillard, but like very few teams have ever had a player like Damian Lillard when his comp is just a shade worse than Steph Curry. Like, that shows you the level he's at by all the advanced metrics. Damian Lillard, or most, I should say, that you would look at, EPM's a big one. Damian Lillard was the number 1 offensive player in the league last year. And the fact that the Blazers had an offensive rating where it was, when you look at that roster, of a pretty poor roster or young guys that are still learning, but the constant was Damian Lillard, that it all revolved around him. It shows you his value there as well, that how he can prop teams up. So now you fit him on a team with Giannis. And I think, I'm obviously not the only one to make this point, but you automatically default to the pick and roll situations. When the Bucks won the title, the best part of their offense, which was bad, by the way, but the best part of their offense was Giannis setting the screen and being the roll man. It was usually with Khris. Sometimes it was Drew, but they were good in that scenario. They're going to be you're not going to be able to defend that in this scenario where Damian Lillard last year was the number 1 scorer in terms of ball handlers setting up a pick and roll. When you run a pick and roll, Damian Lillard's the guy that scores the most points in the league as a ball handler. Giannis scores I think it's 1.2 points per possession as the roll man. So now you're going to tell defenses, pick your poison. Like, we're going to run the pick and roll here. Are you going to stay and double team Damian Lillard and ignore Giannis rolling to the rim? Or are you going to get on Giannis and leave Dame open for the shot? In Portland, again, with that high offensive rating, the defenses just said, fine, we're just going to leave both those guys out there. We're going to double team Dame, and we don't care if Jusuf Nurkic is rolling to the rim. We'll take our chances that he misses a layup. You can't do that with the Bucks. And then even if you do have a capable defense with switch guys you would look at in the past, Boston, Miami, and teams like that. Well, Giannis can roll, and we've seen how deadly Giannis is not only as a scorer, but as a playmaker with the ball. And then you got Khris Middleton sitting in the corner. That's going to be wide open. So that changes all of it. But to me, the even bigger part, too, is how you can stagger things that, in the past, we usually saw Drew was the guy that would pull the short straw, and he would play with a lot of the reserves in the second quarter or third or early fourth quarter. But now you can really structure this where you're going to have Giannis or Dame on the floor at all times, it would certainly seem like. And thinking about what are the pairings going to be? Would you put Giannis and Khris on the bench? They can play together and they have that chemistry. And you leave Dame and Brook because, we talked about the pick and roll. Mm-hmm. Brook Lopez was the Bucks' best roll man last year. And when they did that pick and roll with he and Joe Ingles, that was some of their best offense. So now you can imagine what it's going to look like with Brook and Damian Lillard. It just gives you a lot more offensively. And I said it a couple minutes ago, but this team won a title in 21 in spite of a pretty bad offense. That it was an elite defense and they just did enough offensively. But really the thing that stood out the most in Bud's tenure was he built and constructed an elite defense, but that offense just seemed to get progressively worse, especially in the playoffs year after year. Injuries were a part of it, but there wasn't a lot in the half court, and Damian Lillard is going to solve most, if not all of that.
You're getting me so excited for the Milwaukee Bucks because my initial thought was basically, when I think about what do the Bucks look like next year, and you broke it down great. My initial thought is, who are you going to stop? Like, are you going to try to stop Giannis? Well, guess what? You got Dame Lillard or Khris Middleton knocking down shots. You can try to stop Dame. What do you do when Giannis is going to tear you down, go to the rim and dunk? Like it provides so many options that the defense can't, like you said, pick your poison. It basically comes down to that. So what is the window here? Because what is the contract like for Dame? I know down the road, he's due like $60-some million. I guess that's just the NBA today. But it seems like is short term. Is it like a 2-year window because Giannis needs to sign some sort of extension perhaps down the road? What's the window here for Bucks fans?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you were poking around in my DMs or texts, but I was actually having this exact conversation with someone this morning. I still think, and Dame's under contract for 4 years, so this would be through the 26-27 season. Okay. Yeah, so I still think your window, and I'm vamping here as I'm trying to pull up the cap sheet, but I think your window is still 2 years for now. It certainly increases the chances that Giannis is going to sign some type of extension. I still don't think this changes him signing this year, and I don't think he should. If you're Giannis, you still have to wait it out to see. We all think this is going to be seamless, but I got to make sure it is, in fact, going to be seamless and this works. So he should wait and see how this plays out and wait to sign any extension then. But I do think, at least for the interim, you still have to view this as a 2-year window of that's when Khris and Brooks deals come up. I know Khris has a player option for the third, but this roster, when we left free agency in the summer, it was basically set to detonate in the offseason 2 years from now of, okay, that's where all the questions are on the horizon. And what do you do then? And Giannis will just be entering his 30s. Still, you would imagine going to be an effective player, but you're probably going to have to figure out a new supporting cast around him. Brooks already 35. Khris is already in his 30s. And now Dame is the same age almost to the day as Drew Holiday, that it's still an old group, and you still got to figure that out down the road. So for that reason, I think it is still, at least for now, a 2-year window. If this prompts Giannis to sign an extension, that changes things. And it changes things next year too, I should say, in the offseason, because, when this new CBA went into place, I think all of us thought, well, there goes guys taking cheaper deals to join contenders. But we've seen the opposite, that this CBA has basically wiped out the middle class. And, in the past, you'd use your mid-level or your taxpayer mid-level. And now we're seeing more and more guys sign for the minimum. I mean, the Bucks got it with Malik Beasley. You would look at the Suns and you'd think, how did Eric Gordon end up somewhere in the minimum? We're seeing more of that this offseason. that I think the league didn't anticipate. Players were going to be willing to say, I'll take the vet minimum, and then next year you'll have my bird rights and I'll cash in next year, kind of like the Bucks did with Bobby Portis. But we've seen a lot of that in this first offseason of the new CBA. And the point is, you got Giannis and Damian Lillard on the same team. That might be the most fun team in the league to watch and to play on. You're now, where it was Phoenix in the offseason this past year, you're now that team that theoretically guys are looking at and saying, I'll take the vet minimum to play with those two guys.
This is so exciting. This is so exciting as a fan of the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, Giannis made headlines recently by basically, saying that he would be open to leaving Milwaukee if everybody wasn't all in. Now, I assume he says this behind the scenes. This isn't the first time, like all of a sudden he's like, I have this idea. I'm going to tell the media first. So obviously the Bucks knew of that and knew of his fire and desire and all those things. But I just wanted to play, in case you didn't remember what Giannis had to say. Here are the comments. What is this? The 48 Minutes podcast.
Yeah.
Let me share this, and we can all take a listen to what Giannis had to say earlier, just not too long ago.
As long as we play and we approach the game every single day the right way, and we all sacrifice for a common goal, I can see myself being in Milwaukee Bucks for the rest of my career. But the moment I feel like people are not committed as I am to get that golden thing in the back, I am not. I'm a Milwaukee Buck. But most importantly, I'm a winner. I want to win. And I have to do whatever.
Okay. Well, I just decided to.
I have to do whatever it takes. Yeah.
But anyway, the point is, yeah. And so when I heard that, I didn't take it as Giannis trying to be malicious and saying, you do something or I'm out. But it was surprising to me, Justin, because it was surprising in the sense that he opened the door to not be a Milwaukee Buck anymore. And that's something that I hadn't heard from him in years past, where he's like Milwaukee forever, basically. And so how much do you think those comments created a sense of urgency to get something done?
So it wasn't to this level. That, to your point, this is the most we've heard him not say I'm leaving Milwaukee, but at least not shut that door. He made some comments, 3 years ago when we were leading up to the first will he or won't we extension, but not to this extent. But look, it's not like that blindsided John Horst and the ownership group and the front office of like, holy cow, is he serious? He might leave. I guess we should go do something. To me, I took that as what we just kind of talked about of, I feel good with this group. And, he pointed out in that same interview that Drew's the best teammate he's ever had. We've heard him have nothing but glowing remarks for Brook Lopez. And I think that even increased the year that Brook basically missed 2/3 of it, when Giannis had to shoulder a lot of that load as the center and the guy that was kind of doing the dirty work. And that bond that he has with Khris, obviously, is one that's special too, is the two guys that have kind of been here from the ground floor. So I took that as, I feel good about this group, and I know we're a title contender right now, but if I'm going to sign, you got to have a plan B, and we got to know, like, what are we doing in 2 years when Brook's going to be a 37-year-old free agent that you would assume is probably not going to be in a Bucks uniform, may not be in the league. Khris is going to be facing a player option, and he's going to be at that age that Brook is at now, and Drew's going to be in the same boat as well. So we can't just run it back again in 2 years. You got to have a plan B. And I'm not going to just sit back and say, well, we tried. I guess I'll be here for the rebuild, and maybe in 2 or 3 years we can do this again. You need to already be thinking of that. And I need to see, we're going to pivot into phase 2. That's what I took it as. And I think it just lined up perfectly for John Horst. We've seen more kind of come out that, a month ago or so is when they had these initial talks. And then Portland in the last week basically made it be known, this isn't working with Miami. So here's 2 teams Dame would like to go to besides the Miami Heat, Bucks and Brooklyn Nets. What do you guys got? And credit to John Horst to swoop in and make a tough call, because, we spent a lot of time talking about how great it's going to be to have Damian Lillard. And it is. I am very pleased that almost unanimous, the reaction among Bucks fans and everybody else has been, I'm so excited for Damian Lillard. This is going to be great. I'm super bummed that it means we had to give up Jrue Holiday and he's not going to be a part of this. And people recognizing just how instrumental Jrue Holiday was in that title, number one, and helping change the way that this team played and obviously pushing them to the next level defensively as well. I mean, he made some of the more iconic plays in Bucks playoff history. When you think about that strip on Devin Booker and the lob to Giannis, I know they lost the series, but if we go back to game 5 against the Celtics, everything he did in those final 15 seconds where you were just thinking, holy cow, I can't believe this team is going to beat the Celtics with just Jrue Holiday and Giannis. He made some special plays, and he was a big part of this Bucks community. So I'm glad that he's getting recognized for that on the way out. And now I think most Bucks fans hold the same feeling. I hope he ends up with the Clippers or somebody on the West Coast and can be closer to home and just play in the other conference. I don't want to have to go against Jrue Holiday with the Sixers or the Heat or the Celtics.
Yeah. That's kind of bummed that you had to get rid of Holiday, as a fan, but because of all the things you talked about.
Well, and the interesting thing, not to cut you off, was I think it was Woj that had pointed out too, when this was first brought up of we're moving on from the Heat. You are the two teams he would also like to go to, and let's work on something that John Horst did everything in his power to see how can we pull something together that doesn't involve Jrue Holiday and just ultimately face the realization of there's no way we can do it. I've seen some people point out like, well, why wouldn't you trade Khris? That number one, again, I think we still continually undervalue everything that Khris Middleton has brought to this team, but the Bucks couldn't trade Khris or Brook Lopez until December 15th, I think, because they just signed in the offseason. So when you looked at the roster structure, this was all you could really do was Jrue had to be included to match that salary.
Yeah. And it seems like new head coach Adrian Griffin has himself a nice spot to be in as a first. Like, that's got to be insane. Like, hey, I'm going to become a head coach for the first time, and now I've got like an all-star super team. I mean, there can't be any excuses from the coaching perspective. Like, he has to jump in and win everything.
Yeah, the last time we saw this was Brooklyn with Steve Nash. Now, granted, Steve Nash came right into coaching. I know he was in the Warriors working with them as like a consultant and working a lot with KD, but Steve Nash wasn't an assistant coach, wasn't cutting his teeth in that sense. Mm-hmm. So it's not a great comp. Ime Udoka, in terms of their coaching profile and their background, is a pretty good comp, both role players in the league and both with extensive track records as an assistant coach for multiple coaches. But the assembly here of Giannis and Dame is obviously greater than Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, but that's probably the closest. And look, we saw what it did for the Celtics, that Ime Udoka proved to be a very good coach. I think this also kind of alleviates some pressure from Adrian Griffin because the focus is on Damian Lillard and Giannis now. And I mean, I've got to assume this team is going to be a pretty good regular season team. Whereas, if you don't make this trade and you come in with the same group, I still think they're one of the best, if not the best team in the Eastern Conference. But you have the cloud of the offseason and what Giannis said kind of hanging over you that may put some pressure on your teammates. If you get off to a slow start, then the questions become, well, what does this mean for Giannis? Or who's going to get traded? Or was Adrian Griffin the right guy to hire? And now all that's gone. And it's just, well, I got these two guys that we know are pretty good. And the focus and the pressure isn't going to be on me so much. And, also the fact that Damian Lillard is now reunited with a guy that coached him for 9 years in Portland, in Terry Stotts, the longtime Bucks assistant and longtime Blazers head coach, that is going to be the man basically running your offense. And now you just get to tell him on the eve of training camp, essentially, like, hey, Terry, everything you worked on, throw it out and just bring back that playbook that you had in Portland.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's another great point. I'm super excited. Like, once again, I heard the news and I was like, this is real life. Damian Lillard is, because, following this team for several years, if I had told you a decade ago, heck, 8 years ago, something like that, this is a reality or a possibility, it would have been weird. Like, no, I don't think so, but I'm super excited. And it was shocking news to me. And I am super excited for the start of the season. Justin Garcia, anything else you'd like to add as we wrap up the John Cast?
No, I don't think so. We got media day on Monday. I'm sure I'll see you there, and we can catch up there.
Yeah, I'll be there.
I'm gonna be I'm gonna be very curious to see. I was gonna reach out to the very few actual national contacts I have to see, like, you gonna be in Milwaukee for media day? Like, now all of a sudden you're the team that I'm curious to see who are the national guys that are showing up to Milwaukee on Monday for media day to I would assume get our first glimpse of Damian Lillard in a Bucks uniform, and training camp starts Tuesday, so just a couple of days from now, and before you know, preseason's here a week from Sunday.
Wow, it's happened so quickly every year. Justin Garcia, thank you so much for the time today.
Anytime, my man.
All right, cool. There you go. It's JG, Justin Garcia of the Milwaukee Bucks Radio Network, talking about the big news, Damian Lillard coming to Milwaukee. All right, thanks for listening to the Johncast podcast. Once again, reminder, follow, subscribe, whatever you got to do, download, whatever you got to do so you don't miss a new episode on whatever platform you listen to this podcast. Go do it right now and sign up for my newsletter, johncastpodcast.com. I'll tell you when I do cool things with the podcast. All right, thanks for listening to this edition of the Johncast podcast. Goodbye.